I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, I will start by introducing everyone here. Starting at my far right, we have Mr. Casey Morrisroe, board member. Behind him is our board clerk, Lynn Town. Next to me, to my right, is Mrs. Lisa May, board member. And then directly to my left, Rebecca Smith, vice chair. And then farther to my left, Tambra Pickford, chair, board member. And then also we have Dr. Stephen Cook, superintendent, present. No public comment will be taken or accepted this evening during our meeting. Any public comment received in writing prior to tonight's meeting will be acknowledged at the time noted on the agenda, and we do not have any public comment this evening. I'll note that again, though, on the agenda. Comments may be submitted to the board using trustees@cdaschools.org or through the clerk at any time. Issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff member for follow-up. Thank you to everyone. All right. Looking at our agenda tonight, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, we will get right to it. Our first is board recognition, and I will call on Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. At this point, I would like to ask Devin and Mike to please come forward. I would clarify that Mike will be coming forward. First of all, Mike, thank you guys both for coming. I want to make sure we get a chance to recognize the fact that it's not common for school districts to have positive, productive working relationships with the local press in many communities. And I want to make sure that you know from the bottom of my heart, even before we give you this board recognition, that I'm very grateful for the fact that we are a phone call away at any given time. And those phone calls are often very pleasant, mind you. So the Board of Trustees would like to award the Coeur d'Alene Press the Excellence Award in appreciation of the Coeur d'Alene Press and its news staff for thorough, informative coverage of the people, issues, and institutions of our community. Rigorous and independent local journalism is a necessity, not an amenity, and we value the fundamental role of our hometown newspaper in helping us understand and appreciate our very own corner of the world. So, Mike, please, thank you for the relationship. Thank you for just your positive impact on this community, and thank you for continuing to work with us collaboratively.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Board, we really appreciate this. We do feel a partnership, but if I may, could I ask Scott Mabin to come up here for a second? Scott, my friend, you've been had. Please come up here for the cameras. About 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from Dr. Cook, and he said, "Mike, how would you feel about a little chicanery?" And I said, "Dr. Cook, chicanery is my middle name. What are we doing?" I had happened to send Casey Morrisroe just a quick email thanking him for how efficient and professional you are, Scott. And in that email, I had asked Casey to feel free to share it with Jennifer, but I didn't want it to get back to you that I was singing your praises behind the scenes. I just wanted to let these folks know what an outstanding person they have in your position. So Dr. Cook and I put our heads together a little bit, and I want to thank you for your professionalism. In my note, I pointed out that you are one of those PIOs who is loyal to your employer, We try to get weasel information out of you that you're not supposed to give us. Unsuccessfully, we'll keep trying, but I want you to know that every reporter at the press, our columnists, all appreciate the job you do, and especially this last year or so. I know it's been especially tough for everybody in public education, but the messenger gets shot more than anybody, I believe. So Scott, this is for you.
Oh, wow. That's better than our certificate.
Hey, we make these things. It's 1995. No.
So cool. Communications king, yeah.
Communications king. I tried to come up with something original that not everybody would have. But Scott, seriously, we appreciate you and look forward, I hope, to working with you for a long, long time.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
I don't know what you're talking about. Here's your phone. Thank you, Mike. And then second board recognition we'd like to do today. If you recall, our last board meeting was on January, or our last business board meeting was on January 4th. So I'm going to ask Lynn to come out. Step around, Lynn. Bring your mic, and if you can't get it to work, you can have mine.
I think it's working. I think it's working. Is it working?
It is.
Okay.
And I'll start, and then I'm going to hand it over to her. We just finished up Board Appreciation Month, and we both talked about just the fact that if there's ever a month in a year in which we should be appreciating you, the five of you, it's this Board Appreciation Month for the 2021 school year. And so just very briefly, I don't want to pander too much, but I do want you all to know how proud I am to have worked with you, to continue to work with you in this very, very challenging year. And I want you to know our deep appreciation for how committed you've been and for how dedicated you are to trying to provide guidance, leadership, and governance in this school district through an unprecedented global pandemic. So just thank you all for your dedication, your commitment, and to the work that you do day in, day out on behalf of this community. So thank you very much.
And I wrote my notes down. In honor of Board Appreciation Month, I felt the need to add a thank you from my perspective as your clerk. What I do is see behind the scenes, and I know firsthand the sheer amount of time and energy these 5 volunteers give willingly to our district and students. They are truly amazing and have managed to navigate a very trying year. I did some calculations, because you know how I love numbers. So in the last 11 months, this board has attended 43 meetings. Let's say they average 2 hours. That's a total of 86 hours, not including countless committee meetings and other events that every trustee is involved in. Did I mention their volunteers? Everything they do for this district is on their time. Their paycheck is seeing the growth and success of this district, and all of that hard work pays off in the end. So working with you is my distinct honor and pleasure, and I thank you.
Well, thanks.
And that's it for board recognition. First time I think board recognition was of the board.
Yeah, I honestly, when I saw that on the agenda, I was like, nobody said anything to me about that. But well, thank you, Dr. Cook and Ms. Town. Yeah, obviously, our dedication is in no small part due to each of your dedication. All right, do we have any Board of Trustee comments? No. All right, then we will move on to high school student body reports. And I believe we have CHS up front. That's the one I have listed first.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Cook, district administration, and valued community members. My name is Holly Hudson, and I'm the ASB president at Coeur d'Alene High School. Here with me tonight is Mackenzie Mattis, ASB vice president, Alexi Wilson, ASB secretary, and Lexi Hildreth, ASB treasurer. Our student body is so excited as we finish off the first semester and begin the start to a new one. Here is Mackenzie Mattis with an update of the latest events and activities from the last month.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Mattis, ASB Vice President. This last month, we had our All for All campaign, which included a hygiene drive, an apparel drive, a bedding drive, and a sticker campaign. We were able to raise over $100 for the Kootenai Humane Society with our sticker sales. We were also super grateful to have been able to collaborate with Lake City in collecting as much as we could for our community. We are also now allowing spectators in student sections at all of our sports games. Next, you'll be hearing from Lexi Hildreth for our awards and recognitions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lexi Hildreth. I'm the ASB treasurer, and this month we'd like to recognize Sarah Wilkie as Rotary Student of the Month for the month of January. And we'd also like to recognize all of the students that have been working so hard through all these hard times to finish out the first semester here at CHS. And we'd just like to wish them good luck for the remainder of the school year.
Hi, I'm Alexi Wilson, ASB Secretary. So some of the events we have coming up, our student council is getting ready to donate the goods we have received through this full month of giving to the organizations which we have been fundraising for. Our sophomores are currently working on potentially doing a scavenger hunt for our students. And we are also currently working on doing video announcements.
We would just like to finish off with how proud we are of our student body and their participation in our new All for All campaign. Thank you for allowing us to present, and we look forward to speaking again next month.
Thank you, Coeur d'Alene High School, ASB. Looks like we have Lake City High School next.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, superintendent Cook, and district administration. My name is Lucy Dixon, and I'm the ASB president at Lake City High School. We spent the month of January teaming up with CHS on our Month of Giving community service project. We were overwhelmed by the amount of support we received from our T-Wolf family, who donated an avalanche of clothing, hygiene products, and blankets to benefit our community. We know that many families are struggling during this time, but our Lake City community showed up huge and blew us away with their compassion and participation. We received donations from parents, members of our local military branches, board members, and staff members, in addition to our amazing student body. And we'd like to thank all of them for donating their time, money, and items. We truly have an amazing community, and we've been so glad to partner with CHS to show our unity and dedication to our city. We would also like to take this opportunity to recognize two of our incredibly talented T-Wolf musicians who recently qualified for the All Northwest Honor Groups, which acknowledges them as some of the best musicians in the 7 northwestern states: Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, Utah, and Wyoming. Please join us in congratulating Sawyer Ham for trumpet and Aiden Hill for bar sack. We're so proud of our T-Wolves. This month, we're looking forward to the challenge of having all students back in school 4 days a week and joining CHS this week to deliver our donations from the Month of Giving to our local charitable organizations. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and we'll see you next month.
Great. Thank you very much, Lake City High School. And it looks like we get to hear from K-Tech tonight as well.
Thank you, esteemed board, for allowing us to speak to you about K-Tech. My name is Blaze Wright.
I'm Austin Ramirez.
And we represent the K-Tech construction program. Currently, we are working for Habitat for Humanity 3 days a week to build a 4-plex house in CDA.
We started this year by setting up the forms for the foundation and walls. After pouring the concrete, we learned how to strip forms and lay out the sill plate, a piece of lumber connected to the house.
Then we learned how to lay out the joists for the floor system. When we finished the floor, the inspector informed us that we had laid out the flattest floor he has seen in years. After the inspector gave us the go-ahead, we laid down the plywood, which brings us to our current project. Currently, we are framing the walls and partitions of the house.
Some of the projects we have worked on involving roofing a homeless shelter and demolishing a small house. So, thank Thank you again for giving us this opportunity speaking about our program, and thank you for supporting K-Tech.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again to all three of those schools for getting us the updates on what you have going on. Well, next we were going to hear about Student Advisory Group, SAG, and I'll start with Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. We are very excited to have the unveiling to you of the Student Advisory Group, and I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Instruction, Kelly Nichols. I think she's going to do some brief introductions and kind of talk about what's transpired to this point, and then we're going to turn it over to our students.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Good evening, Board of Trustees. I am so pleased that you will get to listen to the wonderful voices of some of our representatives from our Student Advisory Group. The Student Advisory Group has been in the making for some months previous to this school year, and we have had some incredible dedication of 3 advisors and our Student Advisory Group over the last few weeks and relative few months, as they are inundated with many requests for all of the things because we want student voice in all things. And so we are so excited for their leadership and expertise. We had our first full group meeting just last week, I think, and it was wonderful to be able to be in intergenerational dialogue from elementary and middle and high schoolers as well as adults. And so I'm pleased for what they'll be able to share with you today. I'm going to pass it on to our 3 advisors. I'm sure one of them is going to be ready to share with you or introduce our students, but there's Ms. Nelson, who is our student advisor for our middle school level. We have Miss Babb, who's our advisor for our elementary school students. And then we have Miss Blank, who is our high school advisor. So I will pass it on to them to introduce you to our student representatives tonight.
Well, I think Jenny has the order of operations for our team, and I just want to share with you how excited I am for you to hear from these students. They are amazing, and they have real heart behind our efforts for the district. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Nelson, and she can share that order of operations.
We just really thought you guys would want to hear mainly from the kids, and so they are ready to tell you all about SAG and what's been most important for us as a group and our plans for moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Dylan to get us started.
Hi, my name is Dylan Jones, and I'm a sophomore at Coeur d'Alene High. As a part of Student Advisory Group, I can tell you that all the students are very invested in our schools and that we want to make our voices heard within the district. So far, the SAG has had 2 meetings, a grade level meeting and a whole group meeting. In the high school meeting, we focused on what this group really feels passionate about and the topics we can further act on. In the whole group meeting, we had a chance to meet and interact with other grade levels, but most importantly, we had 3 different groups working on topics that we are passionate about. The topics of each group include student agency, student safety, and student equity. In our last meeting, we had valuable discussions on where we can start change, and we voiced our opinion with advisors listening in. We have had very rich discussions and have already given some great feedback to the advisors as well, as come up with some ideas to help our fellow students.
Thank you, Dylan. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Superintendent Cook, my name is Austin Smith. I'm also a sophomore from CHS. And while Dylan over here talked about kind of what we're doing right now, I'm here to talk about more of a long-term, year-long, 2-year-long plans. So one of the things that we're going to want to do long-term is elect a district, a SAG chair and a vice chair. That way we can have reliable student input at all district board meetings. Another thing that we're hoping to improve upon and get set up throughout our long-term goals is we would like to be regularly interfacing with local student governments like LCHS and CHS student councils. And then finally, we would like to increase student involvement and awareness of SAG as a whole. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Lillian McNamee. I am a 4th grader at Darton Elementary. I love being a part of the student advisory because I get to tell the board what student life is like. And I don't really get to talk to other classes because I only stay in one classroom with my homeroom kids. And in the last meeting, we talked about a suggestion box, which I thought was a great idea. A decent percent of all population of our student body is dyslexic, and none of all, at least my library, doesn't have a single dyslexic book in dyslexic font. And I didn't really enjoy reading till I read a book in dyslexic font. And I just wanted to let you guys know that you guys are doing an incredible job with COVID, and school feels almost normal, except for the mask. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Edison Druffel, and I'm in the 4th grade at Sorensen Magnet School. And my experience with SAG has been good, and it's nice to meet kids from other schools and hear that they are concerned about the same things that I am. Having everyone talk about the team, or them, brings up good ideas. I like that this is a way to make students' voices heard directly rather than through teachers or other adults. I want the school board to know that a lot of my friends at Sorensen suggested going back into hybrid because they are worried about getting COVID and bringing it back to their family and getting them sick. They liked hybrid because they could spread out and socially distance easily, and they didn't have to worry about lunch as much because they were spread apart. Other ideas for making school safer during COVID are to pod at lunch, like splitting classes into 4 groups inside the classroom. We could also have a reward for good mask wearing, like having a drawing every Friday from names of people who did not have to be reminded about masks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caroline Sisk, and I'm a 7th grader at Kenfield Middle School. My experience with SAG so far has been amazing, and I feel very rewarded that I get to be a part of a group of students that gives other students a voice that want something changed or improved. I feel that SAG is a wonderful choice to make because we've never been able to give other students a voice and a way to communicate with the school board like this. The goals that I would like to see us all accomplish is how we can best support students during the remainder of the pandemic and to ensure that everyone is having a safe, fun, and productive learning. This year has been quite the experience, and I know that everyone is having to be creative and having to come up with new ways to work around the obstacles we have. I am confident that we will get through this if we can continue to work together. I am hopeful and excited about the ways that we can make the school a better place. Thank you.
Hi, I am Madison Wadham, and I go to Atlas Elementary, and I'm in the 5th grade. My experience with the student advisory group has been wonderful. And my big thing right now is bullying and also COVID, because in the 4th grade I was bullied. And then also COVID because we have about 15 to 20 kids in our class gone because either they have gotten COVID or their parents have gotten COVID. And I also enjoy school because it keeps the home stuff at home, and then I can go and hang out with friends while also being socially distanced. And I would just like to say that you guys are also doing a wonderful job, and I love the idea of doing a drawing every week at Friday for kids who didn't have to be reminded to wear their masks.
My name is Violet Zyke, and I am a 6th grader at Lakes Middle School. I'm very happy that the board and that the school district in general has made an effort to include student voice to include student voice through the student advisory group. This is very important that this is happening because the decisions that they are making we are the ones that it is affecting.
All in all, the SAG gives us students a voice that can make a change. We all thank the district for giving us the platform to speak.
All right, well, thank you very, very much to each student that's a part of the SAG, as well as our counselors or our advisors. Thank you very much, you guys, for your time tonight, and we look forward to hearing from you each month. All right, so moving to our CEA report, and I understand that Ms. Ziegler is on Zoom with us tonight.
Hi, good evening. It's hard to follow up all those cute little kids. Thank you to the SAG kiddos for presenting, though. That was amazing. Good evening to Board Chair Brumley, our esteemed members of the board, Superintendent Cook, Ms. Town, district employees, and the public. I would like to take an opportunity this evening to share with you the collaborative work the CEA has been completing with the district board team in our upcoming CAPS sessions. And just as a reminder to everyone, CAPS is not a negotiation session, but it is our problem-solving efforts where we take time to work and collaborate together. The CEA team brought forward 6 problem-solving items that we would like the district to consider. Those include the advanced professional rung, dual credit stipends, duty times for staff, the band director position stipend, an additional cheer coach position, and meetings that occur outside of contract time. The first thing that we asked the district to look at was our advanced professional rung, which is new to us and would bring new monies to the district. The CEA would like to bring forward an incentive for teachers to complete this rung in order to bring that money into the area. Our next topic was the dual credit stipends that come to our dual credit teachers at the high schools and can be used for classroom supplies. The CEA would like to see this money be given a little more freedom and discretion of use to the dual credit instructor. The next thing we asked the district team to consider was to look at duty times for our staff. Currently, there aren't any rules that govern the amount of time that can be assigned for a staff for duty. We would like to make this equitable between each school. Next, we looked at the band director stipend, and we currently see our band directors working year-round, and we'd like to see them compensated as a head coach. And we also looked at the cheer position as well. The cheer position needs to have an assistant to bring forth the best cheer team possible. The last thing on our item was meetings outside of contract time, and the CEA would like to ensure that those meetings are compensated. I would like to thank our district board team for all of their hard work and efforts to collaborate with us. It really is a trusted relationship, and it's absolutely fantastic to work with those individuals. And very quickly before I sign off, I would just like to remind everyone that this week is Counselors Week. So please make sure you reach out to our amazing counselors and say thank you. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ziegler, and thank you for the reminder that it's Counselors Week. That's good. That's good information and a good reminder. All right, next would be public comment, and we did not receive any written public comment this evening. Next is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through J.
Second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. And then we have the consent agenda items that are just informational today. Does anybody have any comment or discussion on those? All right. Then moving on. Miss Ebner, I see you up on our screen. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Brumley, members of the board. I'm going to go through a presentation tonight. Hopefully they've got it there in the booth. Looks like it's coming here. Okay, so there's been quite a bit going on at the state level as far as our funding for current year. So I thought that, oh, can you all hear me? I'm
Yes,
getting some
yes.
feedback on my end, so I'm going to just turn down. I won't maybe be able to hear if there are any questions. So I'll try and stop if there are questions throughout the presentation. But yeah, I'm going to go through a presentation to update the board on some pretty significant changes to our current year budget. And on the next slide here, we've got an agenda I'll go through really quickly. So we're going to review current year budget significant changes to date. This all should be a review for the board. It's important to make sure that we kind of go through the major changes thus far, and then we'll go through the new federal funds and Governor Little's proposed changes to the budget for the current year. And we're going to take a look at some numbers combining the changes. They're all based on estimates at this point, but the best way to really demonstrate what's going on is to take some figures and start plugging in and showing how it affects our budget. All right, so the current year budget review. The first significant thing that happened last spring was we received word we would be allocated $1.7 million in CARES funding. This went to backfill state budget cuts. The state previously approved a budget and then ended up cutting it by freezing the career ladder, removing leadership stipends, and cutting discretionary. Those were the major changes to the state budget. So that $1.7 million in CARES funds actually backfilled cuts from the state. During the spring, the budget subcommittee agreed to build the budget on prior year attendance and enrollment, even though we weren't quite sure how COVID would affect attendance and enrollment. Attendance and enrollment drive our funding, so that was a decision that was made that had pretty big bearings on our budget. The district had to cut departments like professional development, bus purchases, school supplies, and curriculum in order to fund increasing operational costs and also fund a half a step on the salary schedule, the district salary schedule for staff. Enrollment dropped. We're going to move right into fall and what the larger budget events that have happened this fall. So enrollment dropped 8% compared to the enrollment used for budget. So on the last slide, we talked about how we used prior year enrollment to build a budget. And so enrollment did not end up coming in where was budgeted. It came in significantly lower at 8%. And then we also opened the eSchool, which added administrators to the budget and some office staff. So next, a pretty large budget event was the state allocated $3.5 million in coronavirus relief funds. These funds could not be used to backfill cuts. They could only be used for specific COVID-related purchases. And the deadline to spend these funds was within 4 months of receiving word on the funds. So pretty significant strings attached to these federal dollars that came our way. The coronavirus relief funds triggered contingency language on our contract negotiations. And so we reopened negotiations last fall. We settled with a $1,500 stipend for all staff, prorated on FTE. And this was for additional work expected of employees in reopening school safely that fall or over the fall. So, and then the remainder of these funds went to COVID response, like remote curriculum, PPE, HVAC upgrades, and a portion of e-school staff. Those are just some of the costs incurred to reopen schools safely. The next event was that the state announced enrollment would be used to calculate support units rather than attendance. This was huge for our budget because with a drop in enrollment of 8%, that would have been a very significant drop in funding. Also, we had students who were quarantining. We weren't sure how the state wanted us to count absences related to quarantining or remote learning. So funding us on enrollment was a huge change to the way we calculate our budget, and it was definitely needed as far as balancing our budget this year. Okay, so now we're going to get into the newer information, the recent updates. Just really quickly, I'll turn up my volume and make sure there's no questions on the review portion. All right, so jumping into, we've got two major events, new federal funds and Governor Little's proposed changes. So the CRSSA Act passed that extended the deadline to spend coronavirus relief funds. It actually, the deadline was extended after the previous deadline. So the funds should have already been allocated at that point, but it was nice to know that we didn't have to scramble to get all of our requests for the funding in, but the funds were allocated at that point. This law also allocated $6 million in federal funds to our school district, and the funds for this law have looser restrictions in the coronavirus relief funds. So that was really good news. Governor Little also proposed changes for the current year budget. He proposed to recognize the current year movement on the career ladder and other matrices, as well as a 2% increase on the admin and classified salary schedule. And so I put stars on this because it's important to note that when our revenues are increased with this wording, it does not mean that we are able to afford increases like that. So when movement is awarded on the career ladder at the state level, we pay significantly higher than the state funds us. So that revenue coming in is not enough to afford something like that. And that's just in general. And this year has a couple more complicated things going on as far as whether or not we'd be able to afford doing something like that with the additional revenue. So that brings us to the next event that for Governor Little's proposed changes is a cut to discretionary funding. And this was in order to make his proposal neutral to the state's budget. One thing to keep in mind is that just because it's neutral to the state's budget, the state appropriations budget, it does not mean it's budget neutral to our district as far as the revenues coming in. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So now we're going to look at combining all these changes based on some estimates. We don't have really reliable numbers at this point, but I think in order to see how some of this calculates out, we do need to look at numbers. So I have, a pretty big flag on here that these are all estimates. We're going to get some better numbers, probably, maybe not even in February for our February payment, because the state has already said that they will not be able to get Governor Little's proposal in on the February report. So But the first thing we'll look at, so we're going to look at 3 budget events. The first budget event is our support units coming in lower than budget. And so this is due to that 8% drop in enrollment. And then we also gained a number of units back going from attendance, average daily attendance to enrollment-based funding, but we still lose about 12 units overall. And the estimated revenue shortfall from that is just under $1 million. You may notice that it's a little bit lower than what we normally would see for per unit. We usually come in about just over $100,000 per unit, but we're talking about first reporting period support units here. And so this is the driver for just our salary funding. So it does come in a little bit lower, but overall about $1 million hit there. So this is the governor's proposal, and it was a little bit difficult to show what's going on with the governor's proposal if I was also taking the units out of our funding calculation. So what I did was to get a clearer picture, or show a clearer picture of how the governor's proposal affects our district. I ended up taking an estimate for revenues with the same units as what we used for budget, just so we could kind of like isolate what the change was based on what the governor's proposing. So salary benefit apportionment, we would see just over $1.1 million increase. However, discretionary, we would see a $2.4 million decrease. And so overall, Governor Little has proposed this as a neutral budget impact. However, the way that the formulas work, it does not mean that districts would see a neutral budget impact. So overall, if everything were the same with units, we would see a $1.3 million shortfall in revenues with this proposed change for current year. So the good news is this $6 million coming in. So that's the third budgetary impact for current year. That's new information. On the next slide, we show all of these combined. So it's important to note when you see that $6 million coming into the budget that we have these other events going on with our revenues being revised mid-year. So it's important to kind of look at the overall impact of the changes. And so these numbers, like I've said, not final. We definitely want to get some better numbers as we're looking at ways to allocate this this additional federal funding. But this is just something to keep in mind as these moving pieces are coming in. So just to kind of review, the governor's proposed change allocates additional funding to the career ladder. But for our district, that is more than offset by our decrease in units and the decrease in discretionary funding. So the board, administration, and the CEA have discussed a commitment to recognize steps and lanes this year, so long as the current year budget is stable. And thinking back to when we reopened negotiations, we had that new contingency language ratified on the next slide here. Two things had to happen in order to award the other half of the step in the education lanes. The February funding report needed to show state revenues will be close to what was budgeted. And then the second event was that the levy renewal needed to pass. The first condition of the contingency language will likely not be met based on what we were looking at with units going down and the governor's proposal. But even though that first contingency language item will not be met, the new federal funding backfills the shortfall in budgeted state revenues with some money to spare. So I will turn it over to you all for some questions.
Thank you very much, Katie. I think Trustee Morrisroe, you might have cut him off at the halfway through, so I'll let him go first.
All right. Thank you, Katie, for that report. A couple questions on the decision to use enrollment versus attendance. Is that approved, or does that still need legislative approval? Do you know?
I believe it still needs legislative approval. It's been proposed, and they've been shown kind of like the cost of what it is. But in the end, the cost that they're seeing is, you know, if we were strictly funded on average daily attendance versus enrollment this year, what that cost would be, which isn't exactly the impact overall to the state budget. So I think that there's still possibility that it might not go that way, but I think it would be, I'm not sure how districts would function if that's how it came down to it, because the way that attendance was reported, it was very difficult to transition from an average daily attendance when we have students in our buildings every day to when we're in blended, or we have remote learning Wednesdays, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure how it would really work if they ended up going with average daily attendance. So I'm pretty confident it's going to be enrollment.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, this was something we talked about early in the budget cycle, I think, where or maybe it was during negotiations or summer. The state has a cap kind of on your losses of enrollment at 3%, I want to say. And has there been any clarity on that? I know that's kind of more or was set up for kind of one-off situations where it's just one district, and this year it might be all 115 districts or close to it. So have they talked about how they're going to address that?
Yeah, so that one, it's a self-funded protection where all the districts are paying in order to fund, we call it the unit protection. So in a year where almost every district was losing, it would, the benefit of that wouldn't really bail out any districts. It would, we would all have the protection kick in on our formula, but we'd be paying into the protection so much that it really would probably be a net zero impact almost. So I think with the change in units that we're experiencing right now, we're well below any protection kicking in. I know that there are districts out there that may be gaining some additional units compared to prior year just from the change in enrollment, or from attendance to enrollment. So that's kind of interesting. And what I'm been talking to the state to see if there's any way that they can try and even some of that out to help out a district such as ours that is losing units, especially in light of the fact that a district might be gaining units over prior year, with the recognition that this is an odd year. We're all just trying to get through it with a stable budget and keeping staff on hand, that sort of thing. So,
thank you.
Katie, I had a quick question. You mentioned the CRSSA, it passed and it released some of the restrictions on the CARES funds. So this additional $6 million, do you know what else we will be able to spend that money on? I know it was very restrictive before, but how do you anticipate it can be utilized in the coming year?
So at this point, what I'm reading about these funds are that, you know, you can read the regulations pretty and walk away feeling like they could be used for just about anything a school district does. And then others are reading them and focusing on certain restrictions or phrasing in the regulations that make them feel that they should only be for COVID response. And so I think some of that, it's going to take some time to wade through it. But the way that I'm reading the funds are that they're for continuation of services, backfilling budget revenue cuts, and keeping our budget stable. is the definition of continuing services for me. So I'm feeling that the main concern is allowing these funds to backfill the cuts that we're going to experience from these mid-year changes. And then beyond that, I think we'll have some work to do working with our auditors, working with colleagues across the state, maybe even outside the state, to get a sure answer of what we can and cannot do with this money.
Great, thanks. And do you have any new enrollment numbers for the second semester? I know we're hearing about students returning from e-school or different learning situations. Do we have any updated numbers, or is it still roughly about 8% that we're down?
I believe enrollment reports are going out each week, and some of those numbers are starting to tick up. So that's good news. I haven't seen anything dramatic to make me feel that our numbers are going to be closer to what we budgeted. Unfortunately, the first 10 weeks of school is a huge revenue driver for us. And while it's good news when our enrollment is climbing, this portion of the year, we will receive more funding. The majority, about 75% of what we receive from the state for operational funding, is based on the first 10 weeks of school. So
That's great. And when do we normally get an idea of who's returning for subsequent years moving forward as we get closer to summer and building a budget? I know with an 8% change in enrollment, it will be more difficult this year to figure out elementary-wise specifically. Is it usually through a survey that we reach out to parents, or what month do we start getting a better idea of who's coming back and kindergarten enrollment and such?
Kate, are you Kate O? I think your team does quite a bit of work on that, especially for elementary building classrooms. I don't know if you're available to.
Sure. Good evening. Yeah, we've been having conversations about this, like how do we determine kindergarten is especially difficult because so many times it's children who are first coming to our who are first coming to our district, you know. So we've had some conversations. We have a small group of administrators that meets regularly with me, and it's part of our elementary administrator conversation about how do we reach out and find out from so many families who are homeschooling, for instance, right now, what their thoughts are about returning next year. We know that that's going to have a big impact on staffing, and also we're talking about looking at projections and seeing what the general difference is between kindergarten and second grade, to have kind of a better sense for how much does that percentage go up when children when children come to us after maybe after not being in our kindergarten programs. So we'll be doing some guesstimating, and we'll be asking school office personnel to help us by reaching out to families and surveying them personally about what their intentions are for next year. We can't think of an easy way to do this except to spend a lot of time communicating with our community to get a better sense for what we're going to need for staffing, especially in our schools, and how we're going to make that work. So
thank you.
Katie, I don't know if I really answered the question or not, except to say that it's going to be messy and hard work.
Thanks, Kate.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kate, for stepping in there at the end, and Katie for your presentation. And as always, it's very easy to understand and well put together. So thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I believe we have Mike Nelson, who's going to give us another dose of assessment and student achievement.
I'll do my very best with that, Chair Brumley. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much for the time, Chair Brumley, Superintendent Cook, and members of the board. It's my pleasure to be able to come this evening and talk to you about how we've turned the corner a little bit. We are now able to start sharing growth data with you. And growth can be looked at in several different ways. The first is we look at how students are covering the grade level standards over the course of the year. We have data from September. We just are finishing our winter benchmarks, which were in the month of January. And then we'll also have the opportunity to reassess our students in spring. So we'll be able to look and see how students are covering standards over the course of a year. And we can also look at how students are compared against to their national peers through norm referenced assessments. Tonight, I'd like to take you into one view of that, which is college and career readiness growth. Over the course of a year, we provide our students multiple assessments. And I'll just share my screen here with you. The first assessment that we provide is the PSAT, and it comes in two different flavors. We give in PSAT, the PSAT 8-9 in grade 9, and then we provide two PSATs in grade 10 and in grade 11. All of those are fall assessments, which lead to the SAT, which is the most commonly taken college readiness assessment in the state of Idaho. You may remember that in order to receive a diploma in the state of Idaho, a student must take a college entrance exam, and the state pays for the SAT. So what I'd like to do this evening is take a look at our current class of seniors, the class of 2021, and how they have progressed through from the 9th grade PSAT 8-9 to the NMSQT, the National Merit Qualification Exam in grades 10 or 11, and how they performed on the SAT. On the table down below here, you can see the current sample size for our senior classes at Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, and Ventura High School, and subsequently how many of those students took either the PSAT 8-9, the National Merit Exam, and the SAT. This final column here is going to be looking at our cohort. So this is going to look at any of our students at those buildings who took each the PSAT 8-9, the National Merit Exam, and the SAT. Unfortunately, this data is going to be a little incomplete. You will notice that our SAT numbers are down a little bit, and that is, you may remember the April SAT was canceled for these students this last year when they were juniors. Many of our students did take it when we offered it again in October. However, we had about 170 students who opted to take it over the course of this year. So some of the data is going to be incomplete. We'll take a little bit with a grain of salt, but I think the data does share with us some consistencies in how our students are performing. So everything that we're going to look at in our data set today is cohort growth data. So again, any of these students that we're talking about at the district level took each of the PSAT 8-9, the PSAT National Merit Qualification Exam, and the SAT. But again, current seniors only. This is a combination graph which tells us two different things. Again, how students are relating to benchmarks and how they're relating to norms. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The first half of this graph up here, the two line graphs, refer to the college and career readiness benchmarks of the College Board. The College Board has identified that a student who has a cumulative 860 between their two components of the exam, evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics, a student at 860 at grade 9 is on track for college and career readiness. That number increases to 970 for the National Merit Exam and a 1010 for the SAT. The line above represents Coeur d'Alene Public Schools cohort growth in those assessments. Our students outperformed the national benchmark in each of those exams. Down below, you can also see how they tier those benchmarks as well. The green represents the number of students in our sample set that are meeting or exceeding benchmarks. The yellow identifies those students who are approaching benchmark, and the red identifies students who are below benchmark, again, according to the College Board's calculations. What we will notice in this data set are a couple of things. Again, we're outperforming the national set, but you'll also notice a little bit of a narrowing. The gap is wider here than it is here. In addition, you'll see that the number of students meeting or exceeding benchmarks does slowly decrease, while the number of students in yellow or red not yet at benchmark is increasing. When we look at these data sets and we have an opportunity to meet with our building leadership teams, we look at these from individual student to cohort data. Many of the times we're providing them reports that walk through the data in different ways so that really the decisions that are being made in the classroom level. We know that our students are outperforming these benchmarks, but again, take a look at the narrowing in scale points of what we'd like to see. Certainly, as students are coming into our high schools, the gap between the national norm and where our students are performing in scale is a difference of 53 points, where that is down to 13 points difference in our favor for the SAT. We are also again seeing that breakdown at the benchmark area as well. So one of the things that we're trying to do is disaggregate this and move away from just a score to looking at how students are performing in questions and in relation to standards. I have a screenshot of what's called the question analysis report that we would receive for any of the assessments that we provide. And we can take a look at how our district's population, in this particular example from mathematics from the SAT, is doing when questions get more challenging. Each of the exam questions are graded easy, medium, or difficult. And we can see while we are still outperforming the state and the total group of students who took that particular exam, we see a little bit more narrowing when the questions get more challenging. We can also break that down by cross score, and we can see specifically what areas of the test might we need to reevaluate curricularly and instructionally. Overall, when you are looking at our SAT data, we again see good things happening. Our district is outperforming the state and is very close to the total group average. But there are things that we are intentionally trying to do and working with our building level teams to make a difference in, to increase that gap every single year. Number one, we're trying to make sure that when we provide score reports back that there's intentionality to them, that students understand the reasons why they take the assessment and what their scores mean. In addition, you may remember in previous presentations, students have a lot of preparation opportunity for the SAT. Students can link their results from the College Board assessments to their Khan Academy accounts, and we provide free test prep via Albert.io. Again, we want to validate why we give the PSAT and the SAT. And we also want to make sure that students are being placed in courses applicable to their abilities, their strengths, and their potential for growth. We are also additionally focusing on professional learning. In fact, I was working with some staff at Venture High School who had access to the questions behind those data. And we reminded them of, here where you can access all of the questions. Here's the difficulty of the questions and how you might be able to use that instructionally, as in bring up a question a day up on the board and start to walk through the thought process of answering a question to the best of your ability with the entire class. Overall, this is just a glance at where we're at with growth. As I mentioned to you, we have multiple platforms that we use for benchmarking our students, watching them grow over the course of a year, either in covering standards or in meeting national benchmarks compared to their other peers. Currently, we are finishing iReady for mathematics in grades K through 8, our FastBridge assessments for our high school equivalent courses and middle school English language arts, and iStation in grades K5. I look forward to be able to presenting that data to you this next month, but otherwise I would love to be able to answer any questions that you have.
Well, Dr. Nelson, you did so well. Nobody has any questions tonight.
No,
I'll take that back.
I
Trustee,
hope that it was well received.
Trustee May has one.
I have a quick question for you on the your last slide telling the story PSAT to, where is it? Oh, I just lost it. PSAT, SAT assessment growth. What is that exactly? Is it referring to the SAT assessment growth, or is it the PSAT, or is it a combination of the two? So we're evidence-based reading and writing and math. It's the very last slide before the FastBridge slide.
Okay, let me come back here. This one?
Yep, that one.
Okay, this is SAT data that you see here.
Perfect, that's right. I saw PSAT at the top, and I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting it right. So
Yes.
to that end, I had a quick question about the difference between evidence-based reading and writing and math scores. And you
Sure.
talked a little bit about that, but I wanted to know if you could, and we've put a lot of effort into our math curriculum over the last 4 to 5 years. Is this kind of on track what you'd expect us to see, or are there areas that we need to be looking further?
Well, there are certainly areas of improvement everywhere, but one of the ones that I would point out to you is right down here. You may remember one of the reasons that we did not feel comfortable in the sequence that we had of algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 was that we were getting outperformed by the state in terms of overall average. Now we can see that we are actually well outperforming the state, 9% higher than the state. Certainly at 41%, I don't think anybody's happier. But we've decreased the number of students who need to strengthen skills in that area. But overall, compared to the overall population of SAT test takers, we're right at that national average or national mean.
So if we were to interpret this correctly, if we're a parent or a community member looking at this data, so for our district score at 49% needs to strengthen skills, is that representing that they're not career and college ready if we're using the terminology that our parents hear all the time? Is that what that data is then telling us?
Sure, at this particular point, yes, 49% of our students who took the SAT in this sample set do not meet college and career readiness skills in mathematics from the current group of seniors that have taken the SAT.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nelson. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you for your time.
All right. The next topic on our agenda is just review of category status, which we don't have any action item there, I suppose. Did you want to say something, Dr. Cook? Or I was just going to summarize where we were at starting today.
Yeah, just quickly reminding us that with, excuse me, that this is a standing agenda item, at least month to month, and that today was the very first day of 4-day-a-week back for secondary, and pretty good reports throughout the day that things were going well. I think we had there were a few hiccups here and there, but I think generally it was a positive report, and just a reminder that we're communicating that out with staff and our community that it is a change. We did see some schools saw some students returning. I think both due to the changeover in semester and the fact that we are back in school a little more commonly, K-12, and we will continue to report out on this. We do at this point see pretty good data as we've come back now, well beyond the concerning bubble, if you will, that happens from the holidays, and so we're feeling like we're on a good trajectory at this point. And as you very well know, that if need be or if warranted, we would be targeting school or class level shutdowns as necessary, according to how that goes. But at this point, very little to report out since we've made this transition for today.
Dr. Cook, would you mind just expanding on that? We had an email over the weekend, and I'm not sure if you were on that or not, but just asking, how are we going to kind of monitor schools and make those decisions? And I think we have a general grasp of that, but maybe just in real kind of big picture terms for parents or community members that are wondering that, and maybe where they can find some of that information on our website.
Of course. So thank you, Trustee Morrisroe. Got to get used to that. If you recall, we originally designed this based upon community measures, and then switched once we realized that there was an opportunity to get more dialed in. And so every week we watch the incident rate that is going on in our schools with our school population, both for staff and students. And we also watch factors such as the number of students being quarantined or the number of students that are impacted by being in close quarters, if you will. One of the things that we've talked about often is the fact that when you have all students back in the school at the same time, the ability to socially distance by definition is compromised. And so we say socially distance to the extent possible. And when you partner that with the other mitigation strategies and the non-pharmaceutical interventions that we've got in our plans right now, we still have the ability to do some things pretty well, but socially distancing is not one of those. And so what we try to do is monitor the rates at which there's transmission going on, either through students that are in classrooms, whether it's between students in classrooms and staff in classrooms, or that it's staff or students bringing it into the school from exposure in their homes or outside of the school. And we're able to monitor that pretty well. We post that data after we submit that weekly data to you all in weekly board notes. We also post that same document, so that gives a weekly snapshot on the board webpage, so that if anybody's interested, they can see those weekly snapshots. But we monitor that data every day. And quite frankly, the kinds of things that it would be likely to change a status of a school would be if there winds up being a percentage of staff or a percentage of students that can no longer attend, that it gets to a place where we're running into, first of all, just staffing issues in the building. We don't have enough adults to make sure that every kid's got a place to go, or we can't get subs. And then secondly, if we get to such a high quarantining level that we're starting to create equity issues for students that are going to experience teaching and learning vastly different than those kids that are still allowed to be in person, that might also warrant a change in status. Those data are in percentages, and there's other factors that contributed to those, but those are the two main things that we're watching when it comes to what are those decisions that are going to remove a school from the 4-day-a-week status.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any further discussion on that, we'll go to our next agenda item. So we are bringing back to the board the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare K-12 school guidance on quarantine procedure. Just a little summary background. On January 20th, this board met and we approved the new procedures as recommended by the Department of Health and Welfare and the Idaho State Board of Education to start that new quarantine process on February 15th. That is back before the board tonight. And I don't know if Dr. Cook, if you have any comment on this, or if this was just gonna have the board have some discussion on that, but I'll let you start if you had something.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. I'm glad to comment on this. And I think I've also brought lead nurse Nicole Piekarski. She's available on Zoom to participate in this discussion. And I think we've actually drafted a procedural kind of guide for how we would administer this. If you recall, we are right now at this point functioning as this goes into full effect on February 15th, and then recognize that it's the board's decision on whether or not to change that date. And I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure of is that there's an understanding that we're talking about one of, I think, of about 6 possible ways that students and staff could be quarantined. Most of those ways are in circumstances other than what happens in face-to-face interactions in a classroom, and that this guidance from the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare speaks specifically to that particular type of interaction. And so we've talked about this tremendous amount in the last couple of weeks. And I think we're at a place now where we feel like we can kind of start to identify a way and a path to move forward with that would also give some recognition to those folks that might be caught in that gap time, so that we wouldn't be quarantining folks that would then be extended, if you will, past some enactment date, which right now, according to the board's last direction, would be February 15th, or if the board were to want to change that date, that we would have a mechanism to make sure that those students or staff would not be unduly quarantined under those circumstances. So I think we're glad to answer questions. We want you to kind of read through this this document to some extent. I think the number 3 is the big change on this document. And that is when you have mass-to-mass exposure in a classroom, that one of those students or staff, for that matter, is a known positive, that student that was masked and considered a close contact and exposed to that known positive case, if they were both masked, wouldn't need to be quarantined or would not be excluded by the district. If a parent so chose to quarantine them, we would honor that and we would support that decision. And then I think secondly, the other important piece of this change in direction would be that students and staff that were a close contact under these circumstances would still be notified by us. Their parents or guardians would be notified by us that circumstance existed, so that parents or guardians could take whatever action they warranted was necessary or that they were comfortable with, and we would guide them in that discussion, at least with our medical personnel, so that they would have hopefully answers to questions that they might have. So I think I'll pause there and see if trustees have any questions, or if Nicole, if you're on, if you want to lean in any places I've failed to deliver as well as I should have.
I want to make sure I heard that right. So with the new policy, let's say my student has an exposure in a classroom, but both students were wearing a mask, so my student wouldn't have to quarantine in the school setting. We'll still be notified of that, and then
that is correct.
Can individually choose whether we want to quarantine or maybe we want to increase our monitoring of our student or what have you.
That is correct. We will be reaching out in each of those circumstances to the best of the capacity that we've already established through normal contact tracing procedures. We would be notifying just as we always have, and that decision would then reside with the guardians.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a great way to do it. And that was one of the first questions I think we had asked of the board from a parent after that policy came out. So thank you.
So Dr. Cook, could I ask a quick question just to clarify, because there was some concern, if I heard correctly last time, that there would not be able to, that the nursing staff and contact tracers would not be able to contact trace to the level that we have been up until this point, and so this policy does change that, or have you come up with a way to make that happen? And I could have heard that very differently from last time, but I just want to understand that better.
Thank you for that question. I think Trustee Smith, we went pretty quick in the last meeting, and I think there was some challenges with there are some areas in which we can contact trace extremely accurately, and then there are areas where it's a much bigger challenge. And I think one of the things that I think in the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, this guidance, we actually contacted the architects of this proposal that went to the governor's work group and talked through some of their intention. And it was to be very specifically about those students that are in classrooms sitting side by side, for example, in situations like we just brought students back into, where there's an entire, a class of 30 kids, they can't be more than 6 feet apart, and that student is who's now exposed has been being quarantined in some cases multiple times. And we feel like after quite a bit of debrief and quite a bit of discussion that we can still contact trace that experience to a pretty high quality level. And so I feel like we're in a place where we feel like there's never any guarantees, but we do feel like we've got a pretty good grip on what that would be and the people that would qualify for exemption from the quarantining under those circumstances.
Thanks. It did seem last time that maybe some of the nursing staff was concerned about this policy and the implementation of it. Could you maybe just speak to where our staff's at right now with the implementation of this? And what
I don't want to speak for them. I will speak from the concerns I heard from meeting with them in person with Nurse Piekarski, and that was just simply that there are some conflicting points of guidance on this, and that is that the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare are stepping away from current CDC guidelines in making this recommendation. There's several states that have implemented policies in this fashion and have demonstrated that it seems to be pretty darn effective. That being said, the CDC hasn't formally recognized this direction. So I think the concerns were that the CDC has been kind of our anchor in this, and that we've tried to align with them in every aspect that we could. So a little bit of hesitation, I think, in that regard, but feeling that if this were the direction that the boards chose to go, that there would be the ability for us to administer that in a fair, effective, and meaningful manner. So. And I hope Nicole's on, because I would much rather her be speaking on behalf of her nurses than myself.
Chair Brumley, members of the board, Dr. Cook, thank you for having me tonight. I would agree with what Dr. Cook has presented there on our kind of pause in signing on for this change. We have tried something similar in the past. In the fall, we tried something a little bit more complicated than this in our contact tracing process, and did not feel like we would be able to deliver that in a meaningful and effective way. And so that was where our greater hesitation lied in that. But we have discussed it at length, as Dr. Cook has presented to you. And I think we've come to a meaningful way that we could implement this and then monitor our data and see what the changes will be.
Chair Brumley, if I could add on to that and talk explicitly about one significant difference that this guidance and what we tried in November was, where there was a we said if it's mask to mask exposure in November, that we would try not to quarantine. This only accounts for mask-to-mask exposure in a controlled environment like the instructional classroom. And I think that's a very substantial difference. And where we ran into challenges in the fall was every single time there was an interaction was trying to get to the bottom of were they masked appropriately, were both masked appropriately, where this is limiting that opportunity, if you will, in a fairly controlled fashion, which there's typically at least one adult in that room that would help to delineate that. And if people are wearing their masks as we ask them to in policy, then it quite frankly most of the time would default to, yes, it was mask to mask exposure, which is a different set of circumstances than all the opportunities that you can think about when you talk about before school, after school, during lunch, off campus, on campus, recess, PE, all those places in which that's a challenge to determine that. That's one of the reasons that we see this being a little different this spring or this winter than it was last fall. And I just want to make sure that's clear.
Dr. Cook, that's where my question lies, and Nicole, I bet you can help with this. So in those scenarios where it's gray, like lunch for K-5, I think is one of the challenging areas, how would it be handled then if I'm sitting next to Jennifer and we're eating our lunch and we're not 6 feet apart? You know, I don't want parents to be confused in adopting this policy, and it sounds like there's a better grasp on it, but would that then not count as part of the new procedure because they were unmasked during their lunch period or in PE or weights or whenever it would be? How would those situations be handled so we're clear for their community moving forward?
That is correct. Those students would not meet the criteria for the exemption from quarantine. And so any student who has exposure during an unmasked time frame, which we've listed as the most probable timeframes, and then in our interview, we would be, if appropriate, getting more information about those times when students might be less effective in their mask wearing. In the fall, we were trying to determine the length of time that mask to mask exposure occurred versus unmasked exposure and add that up to 15 minutes. And was that in 24 hours? And this is far more clear cut as far as if the only close contact was in the classroom and masked, then that is different than any unmasked contact. So we still are interested in and providing guidance on those individuals that have been exposed over 15 minutes or 15 minutes in a 24-hour time frame. But we're not really adding up the 30-second increments for the mask wearing now. It's just this time didn't have a mask and it was 15 minutes in total. So the overall impact for elementary is that those students that are cohorted in pods and in the same classroom for 6 hours a day, they're likely eating lunch together, having recess together. and doing other unmasked activities at some point during the day. And so this new guideline we will try to implement in, or we will implement in the elementary. It's just not as likely to be utilized there, meaning the students wouldn't meet the criteria most likely.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think that was one confusing thing in some of the letters that we received was kind of about those gray areas. So thank you for that explanation. It was great. So is it, I guess I'm understanding that you are endorsing, and this is the recommendation that you would like to put forth, this new procedure for quarantining. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think that at the last meeting we talked about needing some time, and that's where I think the February 15th date came from. And I think we've had quite a bit of time for discussion, and we're not opposed to moving that date up. We'd still like a little bit of buffer. Today's the very first day back, and I think we've got a plan for if anybody's been identified that would be subject to this, that would have that unraveled, if you will, that we'd have a means to make sure that they weren't unduly punished or unduly quarantined is probably a better way to put it. And I think because of that little slip of the tongue I just said there, I think I want to make sure that we also get one thing on the record, that quarantining, we aren't quarantining as a punishment. We're quarantining as a set of guidelines from the CDC, and it's not being done without consideration. I think we want to make sure that it's formally on the record that we're doing a very diligent job of digging into each one of those cases. And I think therefore that's one of the reasons that we feel confident that we could implement this new direction with fidelity. I think it would behoove us to take just a couple of days to make sure that we get it well communicated, that we make sure that people know and understand what it does apply to and what it doesn't apply to.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, say people were exposed today or tomorrow and we're waiting a couple days to implement this and they were all wearing their masks, we will not quarantine them. We will just notify them that they were exposed in this class to a positive, everyone was wearing their mask, type email, decide as a family what works best for you, watch for these symptoms. So you're saying that would come into play, because for me, waiting till the 15th and bringing kids back in school only to then have them run into the same situation that we did where we had hundreds of kids quarantined at a particular high school multiple times, in a row. They'd be quarantined, come back that day, quarantined again. I mean, I think there was a few people that were like 3 times. So I would hate that we're going to wait till the 15th to implement this, because the whole goal is keeping kids in school the 4 days that we're going to have them in school. Healthy kids, of course. So is that what you're saying? If you're asking for a few more days, that then you would basically apply this?
Yes, Trustee Pickford, that is what I'm saying. I think the one thing that we're asking for is just a little bit of an opportunity to make sure that we get a chance to go through. I think right now there's roughly 90 or so folks, and that's an estimate, so forgive me, it's not going to be exact, both staff and students that are quarantined for one reason or another. And what we would want to do is find out of those 90, how many of those students or staff are quarantined that would be specifically applicable to this policy or this procedure, and to make certain that they had the ability to know as soon as we got that resolved and figured out that they would be coming back in. And we've started digging into that at this point. And if we said, for example, that by Thursday of this week that we would be administering this fully across the district, that anybody that was identified as a quarantine prior to that time that was in that category would be invited to come back on the day that we decided. At the latest, they would be invited. If we already knew it, we would bring them back prior to that. But there's an implementation path to getting this done, and I would agree with you that we have no intention of quarantining folks that wouldn't necessarily need to be quarantined according to this either.
And we're still relying on people's input. I mean, when we get a positive, we rely on the information that we receive, correct, as masked or unmasked, in a lot of situations that happen outside of school. So I know we talked about the K through 5 situation and eating in the classroom with the masks, off, but it would be the same as what we're doing currently, correct? I mean, if someone was positive and they're eating in the classroom over 15 minutes, all of them have their masks off, and they can't be 6 feet apart, they would be quarantined. So that would be the exact same thing as what is currently.
That's correct.
Okay.
Trustee Pickford, I wonder if I could clarify one item. Most of the students and staff in the district that are on quarantine right now have been exposed under personal circumstances. So when we review the 95 or so people who are on quarantine right now, more than 80 of them actually were exposed in their own home outside of school. And so they would not qualify or meet the criteria for this return to school without quarantine.
Yes, that's what I took from that. I'm meaning the ones like these next few days that are in school, in the school setting, and say we wait to implement this on Thursday and there was exposure to a positive Tuesday. Are we then asking Tuesdays to quarantine for 10 days when on Thursday we're going to put this into place and they were everyone was wearing masks? That was my question, not necessarily the ones that are out on quarantine right now before this discussion and before we just brought everyone back into the buildings.
Trustee Pickford, we would seek to identify those students as early as tomorrow morning, quite frankly, and if we can qualify them in that regard, we wouldn't ask them to quarantine. I think what we're looking for is there's just a little bit of ramp up that's going to have to happen, and to try to have this well designed, well understood, and implemented across 18 schools by 7 a.m. in some regards tomorrow morning would be a pretty difficult challenge. So,
What do you mean difficult? Just real quick before I comment, I just wanted to say to Nicole, I know at our discussion on the 20th, I know I used a term, and I think some of the other trustees did too, that was excessive quarantining or something to that effect. And it's my understanding that ruffled some feathers, or some people, I think, took that in a way that I don't believe was the board's intention. And I'd just like to express to you, to Nicole, and to our nurse team that you guys have done a wonderful job throughout this school year, and I really appreciate your efforts, and we all do. And certainly I wasn't, nor do I believe any other board member was saying that the nurse team has done anything wrong or been excessive. Really, I was alluding to really early on in the school year where we had some instances where we didn't have records, or teachers or coaches didn't have records, and we, due to a lack of records, we had to quarantine entire classes or entire sports teams. And that's what I was talking to. So I just wanted to apologize for the mix-up, and just thank you. And thank you guys for working on this over the last 11 or 12 days, and really taking it from a concept that was pretty simple from the state and defining that in something that's workable for our district. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it's because of your hard work and your team's hard work that we were even able to look at bringing kids back, and for me anyways, 4 days a week. Having the information that you've had and you guys have kept track of this whole time is, quite frankly, it's been incredible. So because of that information that you provide to us, that led to one of the things of bringing kids back to 4 days. So thank you. We appreciate all your work, to you and your team.
Nicole, I'm going to jump on Casey's coattails here as well. I used the word unnecessary quarantine. I remember saying it, and I remember being asked about it by Dr. Cook after the fact. So I will own my words and apologize to you and the nursing staff, because my intent was not to in any way infer that what you guys have been doing was in any way unnecessary or not appropriate. My commentary was about the future of this and trying to eliminate some of those quarantines that we were required to do by the CDC and what you guys were doing there. And so please accept my apology, and if I hurt anyone's feelings, that was not my intent at all, to in any way disparage or take away from all the hard work and you guys doing exactly what we had tasked you to do. So thank you.
Thank the board very much for your words of affirmation tonight. I appreciate it. And we certainly didn't think that you meant any ill harm with that. It's hard to clearly articulate in a public forum time and time again. So thank you for your words tonight.
Okay, so on the 20th, I think I was the one who made the motion. And I think I originally made a motion to bring this rule into effect tonight. And I think after our discussion and really some questions from the nursing staff, I amended my motion to the 15th. Ms. Brumley or Chair Brumley, it's my understanding that a board member or multiple board members requested that this come back onto the agenda to consider adopting it sooner. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, Trustee Marshall.
Okay. So I think given the information Dr. Cook shared tonight and Nicole and the procedures guideline, I'd be comfortable, and I will make a motion that we put this new policy in effect starting Thursday, the 4th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that. That's with, I guess we can wait to discuss, but I just wanted to firm up that if cases came available, that you would look at them, or someone would look at them on a case-by-case basis.
That is accurate.
Okay.
And Dr. Cook, that's the day that your team is recommending you guys will be ready to hit the ground and get communication out to families. And
It would be our intention to communicate tonight or first thing in the morning with this kind of change in direction, and we would actually build some communication very similar to the drafted policy or procedure that that is in your board book tonight. And if what I want to make sure of is that the motion and the second and the future discussion is that we would be adopting this procedure, implementing on Thursday, and that we would actually be doing our best to try to make sure that we didn't accidentally until then quarantine folks for even the Tuesday and Wednesday if they qualified. But there's just a speed of implementation that we can't get ahead of. And if we did happen to do that we would definitely do the best we could to make sure they were identified and brought back in time to come to school on Thursday for sure.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Then I believe our staff would also like a motion on their quarantine guidelines regarding the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare recommendations. Do I have a motion there?
That's the document that was on the screen earlier. I'll make a motion to approve the quarantine document that was presented tonight.
I'll second.
Any discussion on that document? The motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you again, Nicole, and your nursing staff and all your work these last 11, 12 days to bring this, knowing that the board, that there was discussion about this and some of the board's feelings about it. You guys have, I know you've come a long way in terms of working that out and working with us, and so we very much appreciate that. Okay, so next we have what looks like 100 policies for action. I am just going to generally open this up to see, because I know we had it last month. We had opportunities to discuss it a little bit last month. We've had no public comment at all on any of these policies. So is there any trustees that needed to bring out a particular policy or talk about one tonight? Okay. That being the case, then do I have a motion? And it's at the very bottom of our action summary on the policies, if anybody wants to make a motion.
I will, given that we reviewed these policies last month and no public comment was received, I will make a motion to approve the policies as presented.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay, now moving on to just information for the rest of the evening. We have graduation requirements and high school schedule updates, and I will give it to Dr. Cook, assuming he's going to introduce someone.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. I would like to introduce to you Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Kelly Nichols, who's got a presentation that she's going to work through and kind of talk through some of the work that the committee has done over the last couple of months. So I would like to turn it over to her at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Board of Trustees, I have a brief presentation for you all today around the graduation requirements and the formalization of our committee's efforts around graduation requirements to help inform our high school alignment process. So again, earlier this school year, I was tasked to lead a committee to establish updated graduation requirements and an aligned high school schedule. And so this is part one of our graduation requirement work. So the good news is, or the easy news is, that there's no change. We want to keep all of the current requirements. We had really rich discussion about the value of each requirement. We also discussed with some of our partners and universities and colleges around the significance of ensuring that our students are having the full depth and breadth of high school experience to ensure that they're capable when they get to college. And when there was talk of some possibility of eliminating certain credit requirements, there was concern about that. And so I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But the recommendation from the committee is to continue with the same graduation requirements we have in place, but to kind of update the format and the opportunities in which students can earn those credits. So credits don't change. But what we would like to have are intentional and explicit multiple pathway options or credit obtainment options for specific credit opportunities here. So first, for PE, that we will continue to have standard PE classes and a variety of different ways in which students can earn PE through a PE class, and the addition for students who participate in a varsity season or another with their school, or another possible sport or club that demonstrates that they are engaging in regular and continuous physical activity. We also want to provide an opportunity for speech in the same way, so that there is a traditionalized speech class, but that there will also be a way for us to map out a demonstration of speech standard through creation of tasks or possibly the senior project. Those types of formalities are yet to be in place, but we wanted to provide some opportunity in addition to the class for students to obtain their speech credit. Same thing with technology. And with technology particularly, there's a technology class that meets credit, but also other ways in which students are engaging in other courses that aren't necessarily a technology class, but they are demonstrating highly sophisticated technological skills. So again, that type of formality and mapping out what those courses would be or what that demonstration of standard will be is to be determined, but we want to provide that as an option so it doesn't require students to have to take a class for those 3 credit requirements. I also include here an emphasis on pathways. We are looking at opportunities for students to have an emphasis criteria. We talked a little bit about that in the last school board meeting, and also a formalized wellness instead of just like health, but an opportunity to have multiple classes that might categorize as wellness, and that would be more centered in student interest or a variability of a student schedule, but still be able to earn credit. And then the last part of this slide is the college catalog model. And that's what we kind of want you to imagine if you were sitting down with your student and looking at like what classes you were going to take. You have an opportunity to say, here's the credits I need to earn in order to graduate. And then here are the opportunities for me to earn those credits, similar to a college catalog. So we want it to be easy and concise and explicit. And we also want it to provide reference for students and families to know that there are multiple choices and opportunities for them to earn required credit to graduate. Again, just wanted to emphasize the reason why we didn't eliminate any credits was to make sure that all of our students have access to an accountability for key learning and development. So continuing this credit requirement is going to ensure that all of our students will have access to high quality and standard competency instead of just allowing an opportunity for a waiver or ignoring the credit altogether. And that again was, with explicit feedback from some of our partners and colleges, and also the general rule that we really do value these learning experiences, as long as they're not just something that kids are checking off a list, but are actually able to engage in a real and meaningful way. And then to review as well in terms of those integral learning experiences. So what I've been discussing in previous meetings as well is we really want to ensure that students have an intentional 4-year planning experience, again, with multiple options, possibilities for emphasis, pathways, and the opportunity to say, okay, well, I'm, a 3-sport athlete. Then they can look at their 4-year planning and know where there's opportunities for them to earn credits different than actual course requirements. And then that gives them opportunities to be really wise and intentional with what classes they do want to take or use in that space. So we're excited about that intentionality and that 4-year planning cycle. We also like this opportunity for consideration of differentiated learning needs and schedule preferences for our students as they navigate their 4 years of high school. And then we also hope that this provides more opportunity for academic acceleration, program partnerships, and work opportunities for our students. And that's it. Any questions? This is, again, the review of our process. I'll let you know next month how well we're doing at the schedule work. We're just going to kick that off in a couple of weeks. So we're on schedule right now, but next month will be our telltale if we can continue on schedule as it is. But happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. This all looks awesome. Thank you for your presentation. I love the intentional 4-year planning for student interest and goals. I wonder what that might look like in terms of how we do student schedules right now. They're kind of computer generated, and so like my kids will just check their Skyward for their semester, and it's like, oh, I was put in this class, this class, this class. So is the goal then to maybe have more time? Our counselors already spend a lot of time, but what does that look like? We're meeting one-on-one with our counselors. I know it's sometimes hard to lay out classes and who's teaching what and how many kids we're going to have to actually say like, this class is available for, what they enjoy learning, what their pathway is going to look like. I just wonder what that's going to look like moving forward when schedules come out for our students, particularly. Yeah. And I imagine this can happen in middle school somewhat, but high school with electives and bringing in that agency and choice.
Yes. So I think in the immediacy, in terms of like this spring for scheduling, we do have our college and career advisors who do work with 8th graders and 9th graders in completing their 4-year plans. With COVID last spring, they weren't able to meet with students, and so our current 9th graders are still kind of going through that 4-year plan process with our college and career advisors, and they do work in partnership with counselors. We also have our Zello program, which students have an opportunity to take assessments and interest-based and career interest diagnostics that help inform the best type of schedule for them. But I think in terms of and best options that they can explore for their scheduling. I think there's also a good deal of conversation going on, and particularly with our Portrait of the Graduate expansion, is for a much more meaningful experience, which we will have to figure out the logistics and capacity of our system for. But we hope to have the ability to create even like a 7-year plan, right? I mean, as you know, many of our choices and options in high school are actually determined in our middle school placements. So we're really looking at that element of equity and access and information for our 5th grade families to really look at the 7-year trajectory and what courses that they want to ensure that their students are having access to as middle schoolers, so that they can really navigate the high school schedule in the best way possible. And that does require real intentional time in community with the counselor, with their student, and looking at the resources that we have in Zello and other benchmarks that we can look at. And I think particularly for the 4-year plan too, revisiting that after they have experienced middle school and are growing and learning and figuring out new interests and ideas for their future. So a possibility for continuous conversation around scheduling and ensuring that students are having access to the courses that mean most to them, and that we're scheduling with students at the center, and not just forcing kids to take what's available.
Awesome, because with that kind of college book, I'm losing my term right now, that you look, when you're looking at that, it specifically gives you the class, a description of the class, the time the class is held. So I envision something like that as, a teacher teaching the class, when it is first period, a fourth period, a day, a B day, whatever it would be. Sounds amazing to be able to have something like that for kids to then go and, meet with their counselors and see how that kind of works out and fits. Because I don't know about you guys, but I know when my kids filled out those, and they're older, I'm not sure that they even followed what they marked in 8th grade through. I have a junior in college. So it would be neat to see that actually, and yes, they change their mind in what they like or don't like, and to see that come about, that sounds amazing.
Kelly, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciated the note on the college catalog model. I think that sounds exciting. Like Trustee Pickford said, if we can implement that. I know this year's been particularly challenging at the high schools for electives and filling course requirements and all those sorts of things, with shifting of staff and students to e-school and those sorts of things. So how refreshing that'd be, I think, for our students to have some choice when it comes to electives, instead of being told, okay, you can take guitar or weightlifting or whatever it is.
Right.
So I think that's great. One question I have to ask, because I think I've asked it every year we've talked about graduation requirements, is in regards to math, was there any discussion about requiring 4 years of math, since we know about 80% of our students already do that? And we know, based on evidence, that students who take 4 years of high school math perform substantially better on college and career benchmarks?
Yeah, there was conversation about requirement or no requirement for a few content areas. And I think what the consensus was of the committee was we can be really intentional about talking with students and being a partner with them in their decision making about the significance and importance of a 4th year math, but to require it wasn't something that they wanted to settle on. And I think that's really in the sense of allowing an opportunity for students to engage in mathematics in a way that's meaningful for them, and not just because they have to do it, particularly in that senior year. If that could open up an opportunity for students to do something else because they don't need mathematics in the same way that others, to have that blanket requirement was a little restrictive. But I think what there was deep consensus on is, if we're having really thoughtful and intentional conversations with our students about, here's a trajectory of math coursework that you will want in order to be able to be best prepared for a particular college or career, and ways that we could really expand our mathematical offerings to be more interesting or specific for post-secondary goals, that we would want to, advance that, but not necessarily just because it's a technical requirement, right? So there was talk about it being a requirement. They've decided against it adding the requirement, but there is concerted efforts around the encouragement for accelerated and continued academic coursework into the senior year in best preparation for college and post-secondary schooling options.
Yeah, I would say we do, in my opinion, a pretty good job with kind of the college track and those students with options. I think where we lose some kids is maybe who don't see themselves going to college or don't have those intentions, whether they're going direct to the workforce or military or whatnot. And I see that the greatest opportunity for our math department is growing the catalog there, whether it's consumer math or math and construction or math and industry or whatever it is, that maybe allows a student to find a real world connection to math that perhaps they don't see with algebra or geometry or
absolutely.
and those
And
sorts of
data
things.
science, there's a lot of different mathematical concepts out there that I would love for us to have more offerings of for all of our students.
What about in a math or in any subject if they're not demonstrating a competency in it? Let's say it's math. So if they demonstrate a competency in math, they are only required to take 3 years. But if they are not, then they're required to take 4. Is that something you could do or could require, or maybe that's just too difficult scheduling wise, I guess. But.
I don't know the specifics in terms of the difficulty to schedule that. I think if students, they have to take their algebra. There are requirements in terms of that mathematical requirement. So it's not just 6 credits, right? You have to pass specific credits. And if they're unable to do that before their senior year, then they will have to ensure that they get competency in those credits. So I think that there's opportunities for us to think through scheduling intentionally around learning and performance and really on that other end on acceleration as well, right? So not even just students who aren't showing competency, but we have some students who are excellent at math or any other content standard, and where are there opportunities to continue to accelerate and expand their learning and go into more depth as they just not only prepare for college, but are just interested and able and ready to do some more thinking and some more engagement around a content area.
Thank you.
Kelly, I just want to say thanks for the presentation and say thank you to your committee for their time and work on this. And I candidly am happy to see that we're not changing our credit requirements, but I'm excited to see that there will be an opening of doors in other ways. Because I personally was like, well, how do you get rid of speech? I think conceptually that's important. Or how do you get rid of PE or health? But I definitely appreciate then this idea of keeping those in place, but having alternate options. And so I wholeheartedly endorse the committee's decision on that, and happy to see that, and looking forward to what you bring us in March.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Kelly, I too thank you guys for all of your hard work. I have to admit, I'm a little bit disappointed. I wanted to see us provide more flexibility for our students and move towards a 21st century model where students have more choice in what they want to take, especially our students who are on either end, whether they're headed towards a career, technical trade. And, I'm looking through the speech options right now, and I only see 3 options for students to fulfill a speech requirement. And I think that's frustrating for some of our students that may know they're going to K-Tech, they may be graduating with an automotive certification. And I would like to see something more flexible for those students who are getting the communication skills as I read the description for Speech 1510. I know in their coursework, K through 8, 9, 10, they're getting a lot of this same material. And I flipped through our curricular audit and looked at some of the courses that we're still going to require, and they didn't do well, they didn't fare well. And that concerns me that we haven't culled down any requirements, but yet we don't have the resources or potentially even the funding as we face passing levies and budget cuts, that we're offering so much instead of making sure what we're offering is excellent. And I do worry that we're going to continue to require students to take technology when our students are exposed to more technology than I ever imagined they would be. And their mastery of, looked at some of the technology classes, I don't know if that's applicable to all students and what they're going into. And if we're able to expand the course catalog quickly and provide opportunities for students, that's one thing. But I do feel, I feel for those students who know that they're moving in one track and some of these courses aren't offering them any value. And speaking, having a freshman and a junior, it is difficult to get these electives at CHS fit into a schedule, and there are not very many options. Debate, it's been difficult, and so I would have liked to see some flexibility for our students to have choice, whether it would be theater or music or whatever they would want to explore, or even taking a dual elective, and getting college required or college credit out of the way instead of taking a speech 1510. To me, for some students, I think that provides them more flexibility in their future. And one thing we didn't hear from in the committee is we didn't hear from students. I would like to hear from some students who have taken Speech 1510, who have taken computer graphics. How do they think these skills are helping them in the future? And we talk a lot at students, and Dr. Cook, you're really good about saying our students need agency, they need choice, they need to have buy-in to what they're choosing. But we're kind of taking that away in a sense. And so I would like to see what is the value they see in these additional electives, especially PE, speech, and technology. Those are the three where I think we could have provided them more options. If there are avenues or paths that they can opt out, I think that would be helpful. But also seems as though those are hoops, and giving more hoops for students to jump through right now is difficult. And all students can have access to get their elective waived, through a demonstration of whatever skill it would be. I don't know that provides equity. And lastly, really, until we get our common schedules between the two high schools, you look at the offerings between Lake City and CHS, and there is a dramatic difference in what is offered between the two schools to meet these requirements. And so if we have a plan that we can move forward, quickly to equal that out, but right now it's a different experience in fulfilling these requirements, and so it's difficult. But I would like to hear from counselors particularly. I saw one counselor on your committee. Were there any CHS counselors on your committee?
No, the only counselor we have is from Lake City High School. I want to clarify, Trustee May, because I feel like there is a I want to make what I want to make clear is for speech and for technology and for PE that you don't have to, a course is not required. So we are going to formalize experiences, possible electives, and abilities in which students can demonstrate competency without actually having to take a class. So we are still providing a class option for students who might want to take it, but we are being explicit about credit obtainment without direct or traditionalized coursework. So again, students who are engaging with technology, or students who are in theater and obviously doing a tremendous amount of communication that could meet competency around speech. Same thing with PE. Again, if I'm an athlete and playing sports after school, then I don't necessarily have to take up my scheduled time to meet PE. So we are providing that. That is part of this proposal. That is what the committee wants, precisely for the reasons that you were saying, that we don't want students to be forced to have to take a course when they are doing the work and demonstrating competency in those standards in other ways in their high school career or extracurriculars. I also want to, in terms of the committee feedback, both of our committees took this information and the proposal back to their staff for feedback. So we had all departments provided feedback, and it was taken to our student advisory group for feedback. So we had student insight, and we had multiple colleagues in departments beyond the committee that they brought in, and we have notes and feedback about that, as well as our community partners. Kobe from K-Tech is on this committee as well, and so some great insight for post-secondary minds or post-secondary experiences as well. So we feel pretty good about it. Was a tight turnaround in terms of timeline, but we did have insight from multiple stakeholders, students, and partners as we navigated and finalized what we wanted to do for college or for high school credits.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of that hard work that you guys have done. I just don't like creating hoops for some students. It will be more difficult to achieve those hoops, right? And our most disadvantaged students might not have the opportunity to have the proficiency in a speech class or whatever it would be. I would like to hear from the counselors, in some interactions, how do they feel about all these requirements and how are they able to meet students' needs the most effectively, whatever path that they're on. But I also like to hear some feedback from students who are currently taking or have past taken some of these courses, and to see how they envision them fitting into their future, or how have they been helpful, have they provided, what we want them to provide as far as Portrait of a Graduate. We haven't heard that in a while, and we haven't, reached out to our students as far as their experience, especially our high school students. I think this is where it's most applicable. But it would be nice to hear, what do they value and what have they gotten out of these additional requirements for graduation.
I saw this as expanding ways for students. I just wonder how, because you want to avoid students going through hoops, which I understand, to demonstrate that they did this standard. I wondered if your discussion on what that looked like, or is that a conversation that students have with their counselors when they're meeting with them? I can think of a class that my daughter just took that she had to use technology in the form of a slideshow and then stand up and present that in front of her class. So you see, that's kind of embedded in, has been in the curriculum in multiple classes. So you see that those types of things as qualifying for technology and speech. So is that how it'll be determined, so it's not difficult for students?
Correct. Yeah. And with the Portrait of a Graduate work that we're expanding, right, we'll have indicators for all of our competencies for a Portrait of a Graduate that students will have and collect evidence for, and the portfolio and the anticipation of student-led conferencing that will be able to provide students opportunity to center evidence of their learning in ways that can demonstrate competency as part of their regular high school experience. So it wouldn't be something that a student would have to seek out additionally. It would be something that would be already part of their regular high school experience, even more importantly for equity and access for our students. So I think that we do plan on establishing what are some ways for students to demonstrate competency. How do we seek out those pieces of evidence through their regular coursework or particular emphasis opportunities, or work around their Portrait of a Graduate indicators and portfolio that they will be curating as students in our district.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that last comment, especially about the equity piece. I appreciate what Ms. May said just about that, because really some of these do have an equity component, maybe the varsity seasons, and access to sports along the ways. But I am excited because there is flexibility, and I appreciate that those demonstrations of standards can be met just through doing their certain classwork and stuff. So I'm excited to see that. I appreciate too the college feedback that you got from outside partners, and leading on that track and their feedback. I'm really excited to see this laid aside next month and to see how it all kind of comes together, because that's going to be, I think that'll be great just to see schedules and this together, all bringing both of our schools under the same umbrella. So thank you for that.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're off the hook now, Kelly. So thank you very much for your time this evening, your presentation. Okay, looks like we're on our last agenda item tonight. We have 2 policies for information, and I will start with Dr. Cook and let him introduce who's going to speak on those.
So I think we have both Katie Groutman, Director of Curriculum, online, in case there are questions for Policy 2540, and then for the modifications recommended for Policy 3520P and 3520E2, we have Nicole Piekarski on available as well.
Well, I guess I'll just start with the 2540P, which is Katie Groutman's policy, I suppose, draft as well as some revision. And so do any of you have questions for Ms. Groutman? I will just say to Katie, thank you for taking the input I had sent today and addressing that. So I did see that in the Q&A. So thank you for the follow-up on that.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay, so then I'll see, does anyone have questions on 3520P or 3520E2 for Nicole? Okay, well, hearing none. Sorry you had to hang out all night, Katie. I know Nicole was here, but thanks for sticking around. Same with you, Nicole. And so this will be out for comment for 30 days, those 3 policies, I should say, not 2. And we'll have them back next month for either adaptions due to comments or for approval. And with that, then, we just have a board workshop coming up on February 8th. We also are getting together on Wednesday evening, the 3rd, and yes, and February 25th at 4 also.
I will be confirming that on your calendars in the next day or so.
Okay.
We did confirm that today.
So the 3rd, the 8th, and the 25th. You get 1 week off, which is when I'm planning on being gone, so. Okay. If there is nothing else, thank you for everyone's time this evening, and we are adjourned.